And let's move on to the final piece that we're talking about today, which is Desiree Reynolds has picked out a piece from Vice. So let's pull it up, and it is Penguin Random House staff confront publisher about new Jordan Peterson book. Several Random House Canada employees confronted management about the company's decision to publish a new book by controversial Canadian psychologist Jordan Peterson at an emotional town hall Monday, and dozens more have filed anonymous complaints, according to 4 workers who spoke to Vice World News. Quote, "He is an icon of hate speech and transphobia, and the fact that he is an icon of white supremacy, regardless of the content of his book, I'm not proud to work for a company that publishes him," a junior employee who is a member of the LGBTQ community and who attended the town hall told Vice World News. They said one co-worker discussed how Peterson had radicalized their father. The company since June has been doing all these anti-racist and allyship things, and them publishing Peterson's book completely goes against this. It just makes all of their previous efforts seem completely performative, the employee added. So, Desiree, before I get really awkward, let's just open this up. You know, let's just open it up with a couple of things that set this up. You know, why is this story important, and who is Jordan Peterson, and why did the staff have a problem? Because some of these things might not be obvious to everyone. He does fulfill a niche, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. So Jordan Peterson, well, I'll start with why I think it was important. Obviously, as a writer, and as a Black woman writer, I thought that it was important to think about who gets published, who gets to write what. I think that's probably one of the key things that I felt was quite important about looking at this, and looking about the state of publishing, and looking at perhaps what we think about workers' rights as well. So I'll go on to that in a minute. So Jordan Peterson, he is the poster boy for kind of white male victimhood, kind of incels wingman. He wrote a book in 2016, I believe, called 12 Steps of Just Being Who He Is, and how he feels that his life is being eroded. His way of life is being eroded and being gotten rid of. So he's a lecturer, a Canadian lecturer, that one of his students wanted to refer to themselves as they and them, and he refused. He's a biological determinist and wanted to stick to that and refused to call the student that, which is why the arguments are that he's transphobic. And since then, he's made himself a YouTube career in talking about why he feels that his way of life, being white and being male, is somehow being eroded. And he wrote this book, which sold millions, of course it did, made himself a fortune, and has since been in rehab in Russia. Anyhow, the point being that I thought was quite interesting, again, about what it is that gets written. And I think the article itself is weirdly badly written too. Like the emphasis on the fact that workers were crying somehow is that compassion is a weakness, and therefore have you got a point if you're crying and if you're weak. I didn't really like that. And the idea that it felt a little bit like it was being fueled by toxic masculinity, really. Oh, they actually cried about this guy, and oh, it's all a little bit gaslight and it shouldn't be happening. Anyhow, the other thing that I really, really took heart from this was that workers were trying to hold their company, this institution, their employers to account. And how do we do this? How do we effectively do this? And obviously I know that we can go on to that in a bit though, but we know that Penguin may or may not change their minds about publishing him or not. But I liked the idea that somehow these workers were going to try and say, this is what is the problem with this, and whether or not Penguin will listen, we'll see. I doubt it, but I appreciated the fact that they tried.
Right. And it's an interesting point. You talk about the workers there, and the workers taking umbrage with this, because Peterson has built a career on YouTube, as you say, as part, not always directly as part of the alt-right, but certainly associating enough with the alt-right figureheads like, name them. I'm not even going to name them. Sodom. They don't deserve the publicity, and I can't remember who they are.
Fine.
It's knobheads, right?
Yeah.
But their key thing, their key standpoint, and this is the awkward question. This is the first of the shitty questions I ask you, is that they see themselves as victims of this sort of liberal anti-free speech hand-wringing. That is, as you say, it's or everyone's getting emotional about us just laying down some facts or just laying down our opinions, and we're allowed to say our opinions. How dare you stop us from being able to publish in a global publisher, or from being on YouTube? Isn't this an example of that? And if it is, is that a good or bad thing? Does that actually feed his base?
It doesn't take much to feed his base, but I feel as though people who scream the loudest and the most about free speech have loads. I don't see people seeking asylum screaming about freedom of speech. I don't see people who are suffering from the hostile environment. I don't see as many Black women, brown women screaming about freedom of speech. It seems to be the people screaming about freedom of speech have a lot. And what they're really talking about isn't that they're being silenced, because I hate that. I think we need to talk about language when we're engaged in this kind of topic of conversation. But what they really are talking about is that they're being ignored or being looked over, or they're going to have to think about what they mean when they talk. Wow. I mean, most of us have to do that. Most women have to do that. Most people of color have to do that. So for the kind of idea for him that he then has to do that, and it's horrible, it's awful, I'm being silenced, is quite frankly ridiculous.
Okay. Well,
I was good in there, Tom. I could have been worse, but I was now.
Like I say, I was expecting the stuff coming up my head. I'll just wait for your crew to mob me at some other point.
Okay.
Yeah, it's okay, man. I can take it. So one of the quotes from the article, the response by Penguin was this. They said, "We are open to hearing our employees' feedback and answering all of their questions. We remain committed to publishing a range of voices and viewpoints." Isn't this a pretty reasonable position from the publisher, like from especially a publisher? Isn't it important that they remain committed to publishing a range of views, of voices and viewpoints, and at the same time listening to their employees?
Well, yeah, I guess if that's what actually is happening, but we know that that isn't. The idea that they are somehow being, this is the performative wokeness, isn't it? Like we all put up our black squares when George Floyd died in the summer, and it comes back to this now, where something actually has to happen. We have to put your money where your mouth is. And Penguin isn't going to, I don't believe Penguin, which is a huge, massive company, and this is Penguin Canada, by the way, because they have so many different arms, whether or not they do this. Now, the fact that they wanted to listen, or they've said they're listening to their employers' views, I think that's quite interesting, because beforehand they didn't have to even pretend to be listening. So now that they're pretending to listen, I think that's quite important to kind of think about. And I go back to what I didn't mention before, is like I was going back to the idea of workers kind of trying to hold the companies to account, like the Lancaster mill workers, or like the workers who refused to do the jet engines for Pinochet. That was, I forgot where that was, but it was the fact that these people felt like they could do something about their working rights, and that I thought that at least if Penguin are kind of trying to look like they're listening, then it means that they know that we are all watching. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And they may be aware that everyone's watching, but aren't we in a world where everyone does watch? Isn't there a feeling that there are Twitter mobs out to attack you for anything? Yeah. And finish you? I mean, it's something we see, particularly people who've platformed in like Joe Rogan or maybe Dave Chappelle, who you know, American examples. There's London Real in the UK who do similar things, who say, listen, you know, we're just about to get attacked, you know, for anything, and Twitter mobs will destroy us, will destroy your right to hear the truth. And again, do you not feel like there's a difficulty in balancing solidarity with in a world where, for instance, with the Passaran guys from Scotland who didn't build weapons that were supporting a fascist dictatorship,
right?
That's direct solidarity. And we heard from Frankie Boyle earlier in the week. He said, like, solidarity has become kind of this left-wing thoughts and prayers. Where's the actual action? You know, what are we looking for here? And I'm going to ask you this and bring in the other guys after I hear your response.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we don't do, and I appreciate what Frankie Boyle said, it's true. Solidarity costs, equity costs, and this is and Jordan Peterson represents the idea that he doesn't want anything to cost him anything. He wants things to stay the same, which keeps him at the top and makes him unaccountable. But solidarity is work. It's real hard work. And as the other two speakers in their own fields know, that it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort, and it also takes a lot of money, which is what people, elitist structures, are not happy to let go of.